Hi everyone, my name is Corey Spencer, and today we're going to talk about the dynamic tag management to launch upgrade tool. And I'm really excited to show this to you. So in this video, I'm going to do a demo of the tool. We're going to start with a demo, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about things you should do before you start and things you should do after you finish your upgrade. But let's start with the actual upgrade. So here I am in DTM. If you've used DTM before, you know that this is a pretty average implementation. I've got Adobe Analytics already installed, and if I click on here, you're going to see that I've got, my report suite configuration. I also have some global variables running the way that I'd want them to. I also have Target, ECID, and I have the Google Universal Analytics, just to show you that some of the migration isn't just for Adobe stuff. When I come over here to my rules, you'll see that I have all of these event-based rules. I've got some page load rules here. And if I open up the page load rules, you'll see I have my conversion page. So here's my conversion page. I've got a condition for that conversion page. So the path has to have thank you in it. And I've got a bunch of analytics things that I want to do, some variables and some events. I also have third-party script here. So code for other tags and some fake code in here that would say this is where I would put other tags that I need to fire on my conversion page. I also have a pretty goofy looking silly rule that has a bunch of conditions in here just to show you that we can convert a lot of those conditions. So there we have a path rule, a browser condition, we have a traffic source condition, time on site, and a specific data element. And we have a direct call rule. So we have a direct call rule, the migration direct call rule is what we named it. Oops. I'm going to click edit here, and you'll see that we have a specific string that we're looking for as part of the condition, and then things that we want to have firing in Adobe Analytics. We also have a bunch of data elements set up. So we have one from every different type: cookie, URL parameter, CSS selector, JSON object, and custom code. So if I was to come in here into the CSS selector, you would see what we're looking for is an H2 value to put into our product name. I've got my embed codes all ready to go. And so I've got my tools, my rules, and my data elements. And I'm going to upgrade all of those to launch. So I'm going to click this upgrade to launch button, and it gives me a couple of options. Now these are very important. The first, let me keep the same embed code in my launch production environment. So if you have an IT team that says, hey, I hear launch is great, but we can't upgrade your embed code in our template for another 6 to 8 months, that's fine. You can keep the same embed code for production that you're using in DTM in launch. For staging and dev, you're going to have to create unique embed codes. Well, this will actually create embed codes for you, but you are going to have to place new unique embed codes. But for production, the embed code can remain the same as what you're using in DTM. So I'm going to say yes. The other gives you the ability to disable DTM, this particular property, after the upgrade. I'm not going to do that right now because we might want to jump back into this as part of the demo, but I will talk about why we give you that option at the end of this video, and why these two options are very important, that you're aware that using the same embed code means that you're using the same library destination. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. The good news is you don't have to change your embed code to start using launch and production. The even better news is that you can go back to DTM if you want to, but there is some management in there that you're going to have to be aware of. So there is a panic go back to DTM option, but you should be aware of some of the caveats, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. Anyways, I'm going to click upgrade, and now DTM is going to launch an upgrade process, and boom, already this is now ready. We've taken all of these things and upgraded me to launch. Using the APIs, it's taken all of the things that we had in DTM. It's converted using a whole bunch of logic and information that we know about DTM and launch. And it's used the launch APIs to then recreate everything, almost everything for me in launch. So let's go in and check out launch. So here we are. We called it migration test. That was the name of the property. It tells us it came from DTM, and it gives a timestamp of exactly when we did this. So you can upgrade the exact same instance if you need to a couple of different times, and actually be able to see the copy and when the exact instance was upgraded. So let's take a look at what moved over. So I'll go over here to my extensions. I have Google Universal, Adobe Analytics, Experience Cloud Core. You'll see Target's not in there. I'm going to talk about that later on after this demo. Not every tool has a one-to-one migration over. All of your rules and data elements will move over, but some of the extensions don't. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But we're going to come over here to Adobe Analytics, and we can see that those report suites that I added for staging and production are there. And we can even see that the global variables that I added are all there, as well as the events that I added. So the things that I needed to put in here from a global standpoint, all of that migrated over. So I don't have to touch any of those things. Same thing with Experience Cloud and Google Universal Analytics. Now let's take a look at the data elements. All of those data elements that we had in there, here they all are. So you can see here that product name one is in here, and it is using the DOM attribute of H2, just like I said. Also, my taxes one was using custom code, and you'll see that my custom code also moved over. And I just put code goes here as a placeholder, but any custom code that you had would also migrate over. Now let's take a look at my rules. I've got that conversion page rule. We're going to talk about these two in just a second, but I got that conversion page rule. Here it is, code bottom, path query string. I said that it has to have thank you in it. You saw that before. And I come down here and it's setting data analytics variables. And I had custom code also in this rule. And you can see that that custom code that I had also moved over. And so all of my conditions, events, and actions moved over. We'll come over here. We're also going to do that direct call rule. So here's a direct call. The condition that I had in the direct call, or the string I was looking for, that's migrated over, as well as the actions that I wanted it to take. And that silly rule with all of those conditions, bada boom, bada bing, there we go. All of those conditions are there, as well as the actions that I expected. So everything is moved over as expected. I'm going to come back here and we're going to talk about these additional rules. Now here's the little thing. In DTM, when you added an analytics tool, some of you already know this, so you can play along if you didn't. If you added an analytics tool, we created what we called a phantom rule. And the phantom rule's job was to deploy analytics, both Google Analytics and Adobe Analytics, on every single page automatically. It was kind of a global rule, but you didn't know it was there. So the benefit is that if you wanted analytics to fire on every place that you had DTM, you just had to add the tool. Here's the problem. We have a huge number of our customers who didn't want that to happen. A large number of our customers were going in and doing single page apps and would have to hack the tool to stop analytics from firing automatically because they wanted much more control over when it fires. Launch doesn't do anything you don't tell it to. There's no secret phantom ghost rules. It is all very explicit. It will do exactly what you tell it to. So in this case, we've actually taken those phantom rules, and as part of the conversion logic, it has created some rules for you. So this is a migrated from DTM Adobe Analytics send beacon on every page. That rule was in DTM, but you couldn't see it. And now you can see it, and you can go in and effectively edit it or leave it as is. If you're happy with how DTM was firing everything, you can just leave it and not touch it at all. But at least now you know that it's there. And for those of you that are doing single page app stuff, again, you can see that it's there and you can delete it or modify it as needed. So it's a very powerful part of the migration process is actually the business logic to make sure that everything moves over correctly. We can also see that part of this upgrade process created an Akamai adapter for me because I was using Akamai. It's created my environments for me, and my production environment would be using the same embed code as DTM. So I could go into publishing, create a library, add all the things that have changed, go through this entire process of development and the approval process, test everything like crazy, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and then publish. And everything that's been moved over or migrated for me is automatically in launch, ready to go. And we can literally do that in just a couple of minutes. So to review, we come over here into DTM. One thing you should be aware of is that your user management, I'll talk about this in a second, does have to be using the Marketing Cloud or the Adobe Experience Cloud. And so we have to be able to link your DTM instance to your launch instance. So your DTM instance does have to be using the Adobe Experience Cloud for user management. And you can talk to any Adobe representative, and if you're not doing that, they can show you how to do that relatively quickly. So you log into the Adobe Experience Cloud, you click the upgrade to launch, and it will move all of this stuff over for you. You come into launch, and here it is waiting for you to start using, and it's moved all over all of those variables. Now let's talk about things you should be aware of before you do it and things you should be aware of after. So first, There is documentation for the upgrade tool that you should absolutely check before the process. There are things that you might need to do to prepare. Because of the business logic I just talked about, there are things that we don't migrate over automatically. So for example, if you have an Adobe Analytics tool that doesn't have any report suites in it, which means it hasn't been firing or working, we just don't migrate it over. In fact, there's a lot of little caveat things like that where if you didn't set something up correctly in DTM and it wasn't firing, we don't go through all of the logic and process to move things over that weren't firing. Anything that was disabled, we don't move over. There's a lot of these little things that you should go through and check and make sure so that you clean up your DTM instance a little bit and make sure that you're aware of what's moving over and when. On that note, not every tool migrates over nicely to an extension. So for example, specifically Target, Audience Manager, and AMO. Target in DTM uses the mbox code and allows you to deploy specific mbox in specific places. Target no longer supports mbox.js, Launch doesn't support it, and so there isn't a one-to-one mapping with that. So you will have to go in and redeploy Target, but all of your rules and data elements are already there, so it should literally take minutes. Audience Manager, it's not a very well-used tool in DTM because the prescribed way of using Audience Manager for most of our customers is to use server-side forwarding in the analytics implementation. On a side note, the DTM analytics implementation doesn't natively support server-side forwarding for Audience Manager, so you've probably had to put custom code in there. The Launch extension natively supports server-side forwarding for Audience Manager. There's a checkbox, you fill out a couple of fields, and it takes care of everything for you. So we would highly recommend that you use that. So again, we don't go through all of the process of migrating Audience Manager. We suggest, even though there's an Audience Manager extension, we suggest that you use server-side forwarding in your analytics extension. And Media Optimizer has had a massive change from their DTM extension to a full Adobe Ad Cloud extension in Launch. So we recommend that you use that new extension. Again, there wasn't an easy migration path, but it should be relatively easy to set up because you have all your rules, you have all your data elements, you're just going in and reconfiguring some of the extension and make sure that it works for you. So some of the things to be aware of: check the documentation to make sure that your DTM property is clean and ready to use, and be aware that some of the tools don't move over as specific extensions. After you finish, may I humbly recommend that you test the heck out of it. We have tested this across thousands, hundreds of thousands of implementations. We literally went through almost every DTM property and made sure that this migration works correctly. And it's why we have this list of things that you should be aware of as you start the process. One of the things that's difficult for us to test is the actual reaction on the site. And what we can't do is migrate it for you and then start testing it for you. So there might be some things that you bump into, things in your custom code that we couldn't test. We highly recommend that you test it. And if you bump into those things, please let us know through the Adobe forum so that we can continue to make this migration path better and easier for folks. But test in staging, test in dev before you ever get to prod, and make sure that everything's working as you'd expect it to. The other thing, and I mentioned it earlier, is that if you absolutely need to, for a short period of time, you can revert back to DTM if you're sharing the same embed code. So if you're using the DTM embed code in your launch instance, whichever publishes to that destination last wins. What that means is when you publish launch to that embed code destination, launch is going to override whatever you had in that original destination for DTM. And now any site that's referencing that JavaScript library is getting launch. It also means that if you were to go back into DTM and republish to that same destination, that every site gets that DTM library. Now we did that for a very specific reason, so that if there is some panic button, you could go back to DTM. It also means that you've got to manage to make sure that no one accidentally goes into DTM and republishes, which is why we highly recommend that when you feel like everything is good, or even as part of the migration process, that you disable the property that you're migrating or upgrading over. So if you were to go back into DTM and do this migration process, you'd see that we give you the option to automatically disable that property. If you want to wait until you feel really good about the actual implementation or the upgrade before you do that, I don't blame you. But make sure that you disable that property or delete it once you feel like everything is properly migrated over, to ensure that no good well-intentioned person accidentally updates or publishes over your launch work in production with a DTM production and library. But that's it. Generally speaking, super easy. It should take care of the majority of the replicatable work that you don't have to go back in and recreate. If you've got 500 rules, it takes seconds to move it. If you've got 300 data elements, you could do it before you're done blinking. Like within a couple of minutes, you're able to get in here and move these things over. And then any type of testing or strategy that you might want to change becomes remarkably easier using this upgrade tool. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. So please interact with us in the forum. We're also very active in the hash measurement Slack channel, and we'd love to hear information back from you. Thanks.